Okay, so I've been using this for 2 weeks during my commutes, while gaming, working, walking, watching YouTube, and for like general media consumption. Now, during those times, this $29 or 1,700 pesos CCA Phoenix have never failed to deliver me detail, fun, and just an overall sense of satisfaction. But you can argue that this is subjective. After all, this hobby is extremely personal. So, to make sure that I don't waste your time, we are going to answer if this is worth considering. How is it better or worse than the competition, and why I like it so much, as well as who might like it just as much. Because at the end of the day, like, what's good for me might not be good for you. And before anything, I want to tell you that this right over here has been sent to me by Linsoul, so I didn't pay for anything, but I'm also not getting paid to say anything, so everything that I say in this video are of course my thoughts and opinions. Matter of fact, here's that proof and statement in ink. Now, on the setup side of things, I use the CCA Phoenix with a tier and black pearl indoors with a 45% volume on my laptop, plus a 6 dB increase on the DAC amp itself, and a minus 13 dB level on foobar. Then when I use them on my Samsung Note 10 and GM6 Pro, I set like the hardware volume at 10 to 11% on Hebe Music while indoors, then 12% hardware volume while outdoors, because these actually go quite loud due to the 33 ohm low impedance rating and a single dynamic driver configuration that they have with the liquid crystal polymer diaphragm, making them extremely easy to drive even if you connect them directly to an audio jack. Now, with all of that said, should you consider the Phoenix? Well, for one, the accessories are better than something like the Chu 2, which is what I regarded was the best for the price range. The cables are the best feeling cables I've also handled for $30, as they're soft out of the box, so they don't hold their shape. There's no like cable noise even when walking. The ear hooks right over here are comfortable. They're not too stiff, at least for me. And the 2-pin 0.78mm connectors, the Y-split, as well as the actual jack itself are made of metal. Although the chin slider is stiff to adjust, plus it's not a modular cable, so you're stuck with either a Type-C, not DSP, or a 3.5mm connection, in addition to the cable, which will definitely yellow over time due to the clear rubber housing that they've used. There's also a faux leather case included in the package with this interesting mechanism. I can't say I'm a fan of this, but a case is always welcome, plus it's lined inside with suede. Now, Eartips wise, they're disappointingly limited to just your typical small, medium, and large silicone tips, but they feel better than your typical KZ tips, as well as something like the Chu 2's tips, because the actual silicone part and the core itself are soft, which I found are comfortable. Just not as comfortable as the Sankai tips I use with them. Now, on the topic of comfort, build, and shape associated with scent comfort, these are extremely well built with the CNC aluminum housing that they have, along with what I believe is a coated metal nozzle with a diameter of around 6.7mm, making them relatively big compared to everything that I've reviewed in the channel so far. These are also taller and wider compared to the Chu 2 at a width of around 17mm on the top in relation to the connector points, which are colored blue for like left and red for right. Then the housing height of this is around 20mm, making them shorter than say the Daybreaks or the Haxa, but they're much thicker here at the bottom taper at 11.48mm around that area, which causes them to touch my inner ear at the tragus, antitragus, and antihelix, creating a lot of pressure points that leads to a lot of discomfort at roughly around the forearm mark, which is actually not too bad considering that my ears right over here are on the narrow side of things. And to add to the comfort, there's no driver flex here, and there's a vent, which is good for keeping your ear canals relatively humid free. But what's not so good is also what makes them extremely good. It's going to be the metal housing. Metal in general are more susceptible to things like temperature and humidity changes, on top of potential like grounding issues, which I actually experienced with both the GM6 Pro and the Black Pearl. Now, the solution here is to simply get like a 4.4mm balance adapter or a new cable, but that's an extra expense, and that's something more to take note of, in addition to the whole potential rust and oxidation concerns, which will only really be known after some time. And to add to that, the actual finish itself is a fingerprint magnet, on top of them potentially scratching easily. I scratch them easily, which then leads us back to the rust and oxidation concerns, because even though they're coated and painted now, once the paint goes, it's only going to be bare metal, and that's where the problem could arise. It doesn't really strike a lot of confidence and provide a lot of peace of mind. Which then asks the question, with all of that warnings and like concerns, is it better than the competition, or is it just another IEM in this very saturated $30 market? Before that, however, if you have been enjoying this video so far, leaving a like and a comment will let YouTube know that my content is actually worth watching, and that will allow me to buy IEMs that you guys request in the future much easier. Alright, so to answer if it's actually better, we have to compare it to a standard. My standard for this price bracket was the Moondrop Chu 2, and compared to that IEM, the CCA Phoenix matches like my preferences to a T. Bass response is not plentiful, but it's well extended, all while sounding fast like jabs where they don't hit hard and low. So the aftermath is a fast, precise sound which allows songs like 50 Cents in the Club to retain the bassy melody that they have, but not letting them completely take over. And then the same idea applied to songs like Polypheus playing God, where the same 30-second fast drum segment comes off clean with very little bass smearing, which allows the guitar harmonics to come out undisturbed by the drums, even more so than something like the Chu 2. Now the mid bass carries that same idea because they're not aggressively tuned, so they don't come off as potentially muddy. Although a caveat to this is that warmth can take a hit, and something like the Chu 2 may sound more fun and balanced to people as they have a similar mid bass region, which lessens the whole potential muddiness aspect, but they have more sub bass, which results in the perceived like feeling of getting a more immersive experience in terms of the bass. In terms of the mid range, I like either a forward vocal presentation or at least a forward upper mid-range with like less emphasis on the 4K Hertz region to give me that goosebumps inducing highs that I like for songs like Adele's Hello, and give me like a more crunchier and more exciting electric guitar experience in something like Black Sabbath's Iron Man or Green Day's Welcome to Paradise. And on that matter, the CCA Phoenix delivers exactly what I want. Although they don't like provide the whole rougher and more interesting texture, metallic texture that something like the microplaners on the Daybreaks provide, it's not really too much of concern, especially for this price range. Talking more about like what I want more treble in air, which you guessed it is going to be present in the Phoenix more so than the Chu 2, which allows the violins in songs like Test Drive by London Music Works to sound more forward and present in the track, essentially making the Phoenix sound like bright but still balanced out by the bass, making them work extremely well for me in commutes, sit-down music sessions, movies, videos, and even competitive esports titles where games like Valorant and R6 just sounds proper, like in such a way that if you hear this character is there, you will know that the character is there. And a lot of songs with a lot of movement, like Isabel's Dreams, doesn't simply sound two-dimensional, like just left and right in its presentation, and you actually get some sort of like movement in front of you, at the back of you, on top of you, and so on. Which means that the imaging and soundstage of the Phoenix goes a bit above like the Chu 2, but they can still feel like typical IEM soundstage, but just not as up my ears as the Chu 2. Now in terms of the speed, the single dynamic driver of the Phoenix doesn't sound like bloated or overwhelmed, even on messier choruses like Orange by 7 as well as skirmishes in games when there's a lot of utilities. Then lastly is the separation as well as the detail retrieval, which essentially just translates to how much of the individual instruments can you hear and pick out when there's a lot of things going on in the track, and how well can you hear the minute details of things like the plucking of strings or the minor noises and sounds picked up by the mics during recordings, wherein these do an excellent job of allowing me to pick out instruments in busier parts of a song and work very well during like messy clashes, wrapping this IEM up in a jack of all trades type of package that should appeal to like those who like a more brighter, detail focused IEM without losing out on like the bass presentation for times where you just want to enjoy them. And with that sort of performance, I think it's just right to place this at a B+ tier, making them my new highest rated $30 IEM, replacing the Chu 2, where if you're curious why it's just a B tier, even though I technically made an ad for the thing, click on the video on the top right of your screen or like click the one below it if you're curious as to what my first impressions of this IEM were, as well as like first gaming impressions as well. In any case, my name is Charles, this is the CCA Phoenix. Again, thank you Linsoul for sending this out, and goodbye to everyone.